No Man's Sky Frontiers has finally landed, and after a number of days with hands-on time, it's time to decide, is this anniversary update as influential as previous anniversaries, or has the Overseer disappointed its colonists? Keep it right here in the LZ and we'll find out. Fellow settlers, welcome to the LZ. So good to have you here for this No Man's Sky Frontiers review. For your convenience, check the description below for chapters if you want to get to parts that are pros and cons on particular subjects. Stay to the end of the video for the real juicy opinion that might be controversial. And for transparency, I did wait a couple of extra days for this review to come out, while waiting for Hello Games to give some very much needed patches on a couple of things we're going to talk about today. I do believe that they are a tiny team, and launching updates like this with some bugs is par for the course. What is celebratory and worthy of congratulations is they are quick to be fixed most of the time. And with all of that said, let's get started. First off, let's talk about what makes Frontiers great. No Man's Sky has been around for 5 years now. At any given moment, Hello Games could have made the decision to start charging for content like this. It may not have been a favorable decision, but after a few years of getting No Man's Sky into a great place, it is my opinion that they would have been right to do so. But after 5 years and 17 updates, Hello Games continues to release support for this once controversial game for absolutely free. Once again, continuing to absolutely embarrass the rest of the industry when it comes to games as a service. Now, while we'll talk about the size of Frontiers a little bit later in the review, undoubtedly the most marquee feature of this Frontiers updates is the settlements. What makes these settlements great isn't necessarily the contents of what is or isn't there, but it's one of the things that is actually a most requested community feature, which actually leans credence to the studio actually listening to their fans. It's hit or miss on a lot of things, but with most of these anniversary updates or updates in general, they most often include something that the community desperately is asking for. Cities or settlements was definitely on the top of that list, or one of the top things. These settlements grant a much needed attention to planet-side structures, something that yours truly has been desperately asking for the last handful of years. And if universe with so much lore and so much character and so many aliens flying around, everything used to be so empty. Both Origins and Frontiers have managed to give a little more personality to planet-side things, and it also gives a little more personality to the game itself. I've seen on a couple of occasions people comparing these settlements to something like Animal Crossing. I have never played Animal Crossing, so I'm going to leave it to y'all to decide that if that's true or not. But there is definitely a sort of hands-on, hands-off approach with these settlements when it comes to managing day-to-day events. It's an excellent but deeply flawed concept that we're actually going to talk about. But overall, foundationally, it is definitely something that's welcome. The planets of No Man's Sky have long been desperate to have more life, more structures, more things to add to the beauty other than terrain and trees and grass. And the new settlements definitely tries to advance that just a little bit. The other major aspect of the Frontiers update comes in the way of base building. Now, base building has been a thing for No Man's Sky since year one. Obviously, that feature has had its own journey by itself over the years with expansion of growing the size and complexity of bases. It used to be that you could only build bases on select spots on certain planets. It was very limiting. Come to today, and Frontiers greatly expands at least the assets portion of base building. One of the most cumbersome things that have always been there for base building was the quick menu that you could use to pick particular parts for the base building. It was annoying, and as organized as it thought it was, it definitely wasn't. With the Foundations updates for base building, it completely forgoes the quick menu altogether for a much more friendly and easy to navigate quick menu system. The user interface is so much more welcoming, 100% less annoying, and definitely does a better job of helping you understand what functions do what and how to operate the controls for various functions. But not only did they greatly improve the quick menu, which honestly, they should expand this to all of the other quick menu items too, just a personal note right there. Everything else should get this treatment. Not only was the user interface improved, but Hello Games sort of did what they did with Origins last year and dump a metric galactic ton of new base building assets into the game for you to build with. And what's funny is these assets are so good that they decided to sunset the pre-existing assets that the game had. Now, I can't speak to if they perform better or if they're more optimized for more complex builds. I am not a base builder. I've definitely played around with it, and I am playing on a pretty top-of-the-line gaming laptop. Specs in the description below. So I didn't encounter any slowdown or any rundown for the systems with some of the more complex parts I was putting together, but your mileage will likely vary for that, particularly for last-generation consoles like Xbox One and PlayStation 4. But not only these assets look so much better, they're so much more functional when it comes to complex build. There are a lot of folks out there that spend a lot of time putting together complex builds, and beforehand, they were using a lot of glitch techniques to try to put together complex builds. Hello Games saw that and directly catered to those folks, primarily in the way that they handle snapping and things like that. Now you can just sort of freely place objects with or without snap. That is a definite and welcome change to how we build bases. So now that we've talked about what's great about the Frontiers update, let's talk about what's not so great. I first want to talk about, obviously, the main course of the update, which was the settlements. While they're definitely welcome aesthetically to planets, I've been asking for these for years when it comes to just adding more structures to the game, and they definitely add a little more personality to the game, which is definitely welcome. These settlements are unfortunately functionally lacking of engagement. This entire weekend so far, and the few days after the launch of the update, most of the time that I spent with this particular feature, the first few days was wondering if it was even a bug that was not allowing me to even engage with my own settlement. Most of the time was just sitting waiting for it to tell me that it needed me to do other things now. It actually turned out that it was a bug and the timers were broken, but at the time of recording this, it is only fixed on the PC version of the game, with the actual update looking to hit consoles shortly after this video goes up. Even then, functionally, even with those timers, it is not a very good feature. And I have so many reasons why that is. Let me explain. At least in the early stage of things, there is literally only one thing that you can do with these settlements, and that comes in the way of the overseer panel. It's from this panel that you make all of the decisions that happens with this particular settlement that you own. The types of decisions that you can make are building new structures that are hopefully beneficial to your colony, settling disputes between settlers who maybe were stolen from, or likewise, making policy choices. This is actually the more clever aspect of it, because when you first get your settlement, the settlement actually comes with visible pros and cons in the menu that tells you sort of what is great about the settlement and what's actually holding the settlement back by pluses and minuses. These policy decisions will dictate how those sort of minuses are controlled and improved to help improve the overall settlement. This is great in theory, but the major problem with it is that you can only engage with it sporadically. And everything, and I mean everything, is surrounded by timers waiting for the actions to actually take. So let's say if you're taking part in a game mode that is not creative, most of the footage that I captured for this review is in creative, so most everything, with the exception of the time between decisions, is mere seconds. But the time between decisions is actually a matter of hours. So far, Hello Games, with the experimental update on PC, has it set to a maximum of 2 hours, which means that you can make one decision for your colony, and that you have to wait another up to additional 2 hours to make the next decision that pops up, which means that you either have to log out of the game and come back later, or move on with doing something else entirely until you get a notification to come back. It's a frustrating addition to an overall actually good concept foundationally. And if it wasn't for the fact that it was mainly the only thing that you do with the colony is waiting for timers to be over, especially when you're building structures in your colony, these structures demand actual resources that you put together, some of them a little complex. So that's time spent doing that. That's okay. That's engagement to a degree because it makes you work for a little bit. But then once you give it the resources, you have to wait for that particular aspect of that building to be built, which again can take a number of hours to do. And what's frustrating enough is Hello Games already knows that a lot of the community simply does not like this. We've been telling them since the Living Ship update that was in the beginning of 2020 last year, how much timers, at least without engagement, really kind of harmed the concept. Having to wait between timers and wait between engagements when it feels like it allows you or wants to allow you to actually interact with it and make new decisions, it wouldn't be so much of a problem if I could micromanage other things about the settlement. Any one of these settlements can have an actual number of people that live there, and you can barely engage with them. Every one of these people could have their own little problems. I wouldn't mind doing little quests for some of the folks that live in these settlements, right? This person has this problem and they need money. This person needs me to go get that, or this, or go do this, or do that. None of that happens with any of these settlers. From what I experienced, they are as useless as the furniture. They're there for the sake of being there. Even more puzzling enough, one of the things that a lot of the community has been asking for is a way for us to spend our fortunes that we spend our time earning in No Man's Sky. There are folks out there with millions and billions of dollars in the game that they can't really spend anywhere, which kind of means they hit a wall functionally with how much money they have. But when you first find your settlement, it says the settlement is in debt by hundreds of thousands of units likely, and you can't use your own money to get the settlement out of debt. It's puzzling that I can't just reach into my own pocketbook and be like, okay, we're out of debt. Let's produce stuff. It is an absolutely puzzling design choice. And not to mention, I can't sink much of my own personal resources into the settlement either. For No Man's Sky being such a resource management heavy game, the only resource management that you actually do for settlements surrounds actually building buildings there, which is not terrible. But then after you sink some resources 3 times into a building, between each interaction having to wait a number of hours, unless you cheat your way through it by advancing your system clock on your console, which many folks have been doing, an easily circumventable feature, of course, unless you don't want to be bothered with that. It's just unfortunate that I can't pour more of myself, my progression, and my character into the colony itself, aside from just making sort of left or right decisions whenever they decide to bother to come up. And then finally, about settlements, a lot of the decisions that you might be able to make are sort of buggy or unexplainable for their outcome. I'll give you an example. Last night I was playing, and when the game finally decided to let me make a decision for once, I was faced with a question from the settlers asking me if they can go out on an expedition for whatever reason. Supposedly it was going to be a net positive for the settlement. Okay, fine. When I woke up this morning to check to make a new decision, the game blasted a nastygram saying that 2 of the settlers died, and I lost a bunch of money. No control, no way to prepare them for this expedition, no way of knowing what they were going to do, no way of getting updates from them. It was just, this is how it ended. It's not a terrible thing, but again, these things are sort of out of your control. You just send them and they happen, and then they happen as they are. This also provides some inconsistency on when to next be able to know to check your settlement for when you can engage for it again. When you're in debt, it tells you that you have a certain amount of time until your colony is out of debt and ready to produce. Last night, I only had 13 hours for staying the course as things were. The game is telling me that I would be out of debt and ready to move forward on growing the colony even better. I woke up this morning, the time shot up to 20 hours, and my debt was actually going down. So it's like the game doesn't even know when would be a good time for you to come back to expect things to be going normal, which is weird because the message that I have always seen that it's given me while I'm on mission for this is running smoothly. Is it ever not running smoothly? And then finally, aside from settlements, one thing that I want to say, and this is probably going to ruffle some feathers in the community, but I have to say it because I feel this way. The No Man's Sky Frontiers update does not feel like an anniversary update. I know there's a lot of folks that will probably be in my Twitter feed going, how dare you say this, Legacy? They're a small team, etc., etc., etc. But see, to me, that just doesn't track because the Origins update was itself a massive update feature-wise. Not nearly the biggest one, but definitely kind of up there. I told myself before this review that I wouldn't talk about the rumors leading up to the Frontiers update because obviously they're grain of salt material. But one of the main things that the rumors talked about was settlement. But one of the other things that it mentioned was that we were looking at a potential delay for a lot of the features because of technical difficulties and things like that. So if this was not meant to be the caliber of the usual anniversary update, I completely understand. It's just unfortunate that we may not ever know, at least not until the next update or until when Expeditions 3 ends and we see whatever else was rumored to be coming along with that. If this is indeed meant to be the anniversary update, it is simply underwhelming by measure of the other anniversary updates that preceded it. Overall, the Frontiers update is a welcome addition that definitely needs a little more attention and a lot of feature tweaking, particularly for the settlements. It's a feature that can actually be the best feature in the game if it gets the right attention. Only being limited to doing one thing by making decisions and really nothing else doesn't exactly make it an attractive feature, which is unfortunate because I want it to be so much more than what it is. If you found this update and review for this update beneficial, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content from the LZ, and thank you for coming to hang out.